Hi, welcome to Northpointe Plus. This is episode 88. I have Rick with me. He just spoke on Sunday. So,
Sylvia, the hostess extraordinaire.
hostess with the most.
That's right.
That's always what my mom would say. So, do you want to give us, we're talking about with an eye on eternity in 1 Thessalonians. Do you want to give us a little review of what we talked about on Sunday?
Sure. Nothing else to talk about ahead of time?
I figured something would come up, but I couldn't think of. I tried.
Did you have a good Mother's Day?
Oh yeah, yep.
Did you wish your mother a happy Mother's Day?
Oh yeah, yep. We went all out this time, and we're finally old enough, me and my sisters, to plan things so she doesn't have to, and even my dad doesn't have to. I just kind of told him what to do, what we needed him to do.
Did you fix lunch?
I didn't. My dad did, but I bought everything. So it kind of feels like
good for you.
In charge, yes. And then I had my husband's family celebration on Saturday.
Oh,
so it was a very full weekend.
Mother's Day Eve.
Yes, yes. It was all day on Saturday and then Sunday, so it was a big party weekend. What did you guys do?
We actually had two of our kids here for Mother's Day, Micah and Holly, and that's the first time we've had two here for Mother's Day since Micah, since we've lived here, I think.
Oh, wow.
Because with 5 of the 6 lived in Joplin for a long time. But before Micah lived there, 4 of them did. So, and then one in Cincinnati. So.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about that.
Yep. So it was fun. And Holly fixed lunch for Deb, so Deb didn't have to fix lunch. I cooked steak on the grill. It was marvelous.
Yeah.
Good meal.
It's funny because for us, it really wasn't like a big to-do or anything, because some parties are kind of like a handful. This was fairly laid back. There was a lot of moving pieces, but I mean, it was just fun to hang out with everybody. So
yeah. And then we did what Mom really wanted, which was after we ate, we cleaned the flower beds.
Oh, yep. That's what my grandma, she said, we don't have to celebrate Mother's Day, but in a couple weeks, can we all do yard work at my house?
Deb was thrilled. So if you drive by the house, it looks different now than it did. Stuff that should have probably been done last fall, we finally got to take it.
Now you get the brownie points for doing it for Mother's Day.
And now we can go buy flowers, and that'll all be good.
Yes.
So, yeah. Okay, so now we could jump.
So now, Mother's Day on Sunday, you spoke. Okay, review time.
So we're in Thessalonians, 1 Thessalonians, chapter 4, verses 1 through 12, which really talks primarily about, there's kind of 3 sections in those 12 verses. 1 talks about holiness and sexual sin. The verses 8, 9, 10, 9, 10, somewhere in there, focus really on brotherly love, on excelling at brotherly love, at being the body of Christ, really caring about each other. And the last 2 verses talk about living a simple life, working with your hands, and minding your own business. So that's kind of the overview. Spent a lot of time talking about holiness yesterday.
Yeah, and so not to jump into our first question so fast, but a Mother's Day message on sexual sin. Whose idea was that? Because if I'm being honest, I thought the same thing. I was I know that this is just, you even mentioned that we were getting a little out of order and our messages, but I just thought that was funny.
Yeah, who knows? When we originally planned working through the series in Thessalonians, we didn't really want to pause and do a separate Mother's Day message, so we're just working through Thessalonians. So with doing Mohi last week, that moved things back. Otherwise, we would have been talking about the return of Jesus, and that would have been great material for lots of jokes about Mother's Day and waiting for the return of Jesus, because sometimes moms say, I brought you into this world, I'll take you out, that kind of thing. So we just moved things back and got it. So it just ended up that way. And it was kind of like the same kind of thing. Micah came home for Mother's Day and said, come back to hear you preach. You preach on sexual sin. That's great.
Yeah, nice.
Happy Mother's Day. So it just happened that way.
No, it was kind of funny. Even I was in first service, and we had a lot of people there. I think I checked the number; it was like 260 something, and it was funny because at one point you said, "Wow, it's really quiet in here," and then somebody in front of me said, "I thought the same thing."
It was it was different second service because there weren't as many people there. First service, it was clear, at least to me, that God was speaking and people were processing stuff at an important level.
Maybe so. Maybe it's a good thing that you spoke on this on Mother's Day because nobody expected it. So
no, certainly,
off guard a little bit.
Yeah.
Hey.
Yeah.
And we had like a lot of new people to come, but I was gonna just jump into our second question. So if you're not a Christ follower, holiness in the realm of sexual relationships sure seems stupid. Do the things you talked about apply if you're not a Christian?
Yes, that's a great question. So in the whole Mother's Day thing, like, okay, so you've got people in from out of town, people who don't normally come to church that are there on church. And for people who don't know Jesus, there really is a sense in which it's kind of like, okay, yeah, the Bible says that. Who cares? And the thing that I think is just an opportunity for us to talk about or to recognize, if you are a Christ follower, is that God's plan is true, no matter if you believe it or not. So all the things that we talked about in terms of the damage that comes in relationships, your damage in your relationships with yourself, your damage in relationships with others, damage in your relationships with the people that you sleep with. It doesn't matter if you believe that the Bible's true or not, you live that out. I think that anybody who has multiple partners would recognize that impacts them. It impacts them for the rest of their life. Anybody who views sex as something casual, they know that impacts them. I think most people, if they were honest, would say it deadens their soul, even though they might not talk about it in spiritual terms. And so all that's real. The question is whether you see that as protection and provision or whether you see that as rules. God's a cosmic killjoy that wants to just squash you and limit your enjoyment. That clearly is a perspective, but I think that we can have conversations with people and say, do you think life's better long term this way or this way, and then having a conversation about that is a really good conversation, because if God is God and the instruction that He gives comes from Israel as creator, then it's going to work no matter whether you believe all the other stuff or not.
Mm-hmm. I think just looking at that question, because like I have lots of friends who, I don't know if they would consider themselves Christians or if it's kind of like they only come to church with their family. Like you said, people just come because it's Mother's Day or because of Easter, Christmas, something like that, maybe because of family. And I think they do see like, well, why are you following all these stupid rules? Like they see it. But then I think it's interesting because just from personal accounts and hearing people's stories when they say like, oh, that was such like a hard time in my life. Like I thought I was having fun partying and doing all that. But then it's like, oh no, like that wasn't fun. It wasn't great for me afterwards. Like it wasn't like the best position I should be in. Like I think people just realize that after the fact. And so at the time they're like, I'm not following, rules. And I don't know if it's stubbornness. And like, even you said, like we are in the world, not of it, or something along those lines. And I think that's probably good for people to hear.
Yeah. I mean, in that passage of scripture, in the translation that I used, it says, "Don't copy the world." Mm-hmm. And I think it's just really easy to say, "Oh, this is what everybody says. That's what I'm supposed to do. So when I go to college, I'm going to experience life. I'm going to experience lots of different kind of relationships. Going to do all of that." And they don't know that there's a price that comes with that, and a price that literally lasts the rest of their lives. I'm an old guy now, so it talked to a lot of people, and and there are, when I talked about the consequences that come from being in intimate relationships, not in the context of marriage, there are lots of people whose lives have been radically affected by disease. That's a little easier now because there's medications that take care of stuff, but it's still that takes a toll on your body. But lots of people who it's like, okay, I have a kid or kids, and I'm not married to their mom or dad, and there's just a whole lot of wreckage that comes with that.
Well, it's hard because it's like that. It's not committing. It's like there's still a way out, kind of a deal.
Yeah.
So like some people think they like that freedom, but it's kind of like I don't think you get to really experience like the deepness of how a relationship go and how the hard work is rewarding. We talked about that, like about people say that about anything when you're in sports, like the hard work is worth it at the end. People say it about gardening, like putting in the hard work first, and then you get a beautiful, reward at the end, and you're proud of it and accomplished, of what you accomplished. So, I just think that some people see it as freedom of rule, away from rule following, but it doesn't always feel that way.
Back a long time ago, when I was doing more student ministry stuff, and we were talking about how to talk to kids about the power of sex and that kind of thing. And one of the illustrations I remember, I never did it, but I read about it and thought this is really good. That what they would do is somebody who was talking about abstinence would go into a classroom and say, okay, I need the toughest guy here, and so some guy would come up, whatever, and should say, okay, I want you to sit down, and then she would put duct tape on his arm, and say, okay, sex is like duct tape. It connects people together, and it creates a bond that's really, really powerful. And then would rip it off and say, how'd that feel? The guy's going crazy. And then she would subsequently put that same duct tape on other places on his arm and peel it off again. Second time it hurt. Third time it hurt a little bit less. By the fifth, sixth, seventh time, it's like, it just goes on, comes off. And it doesn't hurt nearly as much, but it also doesn't stick as close. And that there is, I believe with my whole heart that God's design is that physical intimacy, that sex in the context of marriage is it's a glue that helps seal that relationship. And that's true when you're young, and it's true when you're middle-aged, and it's true when you're old.
Well, I think, talking about it, that's like a great, but Andy, don't get any ideas because you will get crazy parent phone calls. Today, in today's day and age, there's no way you can get through it.
Yeah, that's true.
But we can talk about it.
Well, that's right.
We can tell the story and it still has the same impact.
Yes.
Okay, so this is a little bit longer, but an extended family member of mine was at the service today, and their perception of the message was that it's rule-oriented, shame-based message that reinforced why they don't go to church. I, on the other hand, thought it was spot on and challenged me to make some changes in my own life. So my question is, how do we talk to non-Christians who hear clear moral teaching in Scripture as judgmental and shame-based?
That's a great question, and I think anytime that we have an opportunity to talk to people about God's design is to talk about why that design exists and how it might be helpful, rather than to say, oh, Leviticus 12 says X, Y, Z, or whatever. When we talk about it as a rule-based kind of thing, that people resist that. They don't want that. But like anything, it's like I can have a rule that says my kids have to save 10% of what they make or whatever, that they have to do that. And I can force them to do that. It's hard. They do that. It's a completely different kind of thing when they sit down and look and say, oh, if I save 10% right now, if I put 10% in a IRA or whatever, when I'm 22, when I'm when I'm 50, I'm going to have, this amount of money. All of a sudden it becomes attractive because you realize the benefit that comes from that. So I think when you're having a conversation, to just be able to talk, to ask good questions, not to ask questions to try and with leading answers, but to say, how'd that work for you? How did it work for you when you were sleeping around, all those years? Or how is it, how does the choices that you're making now, how is that impacting your children or your siblings or your, whoever it is, to just talk about it in a way that says, yeah, I hear you, but it's not about the rules. It's about how to live better. It's not rules for rules' sake.
Yeah, and just that reminded me as you were talking, I'm finally at the age where I can look back at my parents and say, I get it. I know what you're talking about. Every time they told me I was doing something wrong or dumb or why are you doing that? And I would be so stubborn.
Because you knew everything,
stubborn.
Right?
Right. I mean, at the ripe old age of 17. And now I just remember though being stubborn and thinking they don't know what they're talking about. And finally I was like, I see it with my friends now though, or even my sisters, other family members where I'm like, listen, I know it's so stubborn to hear now, but it's just something you have to find out on your own. And so asking those leading questions, not trying to get the answer you want or to try to trap them in something, but just to have them talk out loud to you and you're just helping guide that thought process. Because I was just talking to Jake Howard today about when he was doing student ministry, how he would ask questions that he's like, I don't have an answer. You have to figure that out on your own.
Right.
Because when you tell people what to do, it's completely different. You get the defensiveness and all that. So
yeah, I think when you it's so easy for us to just accept what other people say, because then we don't have to think. Mm-hmm. So if we accept what our parents say, that's easier until all of a sudden your parents aren't there. If we accept what we see in movies and on TV, that's easy until you wake up the next morning and are thinking, what am I doing? Mm-hmm. It's just easy to not think. And so if we can help people think critically about the choices they make and why they make them and what they want, do you want to carry a load of baggage for the next 40 years of your life? Mm-hmm.
Just with the question, that it's shame-based or judgmental, where it's that's not what we're trying to go for.
Yeah.
I think that's the defensiveness when people start to feel like you're yelling at me or you're judging me. And it's no, I want you to live the best life that you can. Because with certain people, kind of like my mom's, I lived a long life where I had, pain and hurt. And then I'm like, oh, this is this is the better way to live. So she tries to tell me that. Yep. I'm too stubborn. But so when you're talking to other people, it's just I just want what's best for you. You know?
Right.
But can you talk more about the dangers of pursuing holiness that you mentioned?
Oh, yeah. It's funny because it felt like I don't typically try and teach a negative end of thing when I'm working through stuff, but I felt like this is really, really helpful because you hear a message on holiness and say, oh yeah, I want to be holy, and there's some some conversations happening underneath that, some assumptions that happen that are really good to wrestle with and to come to grips with. So one of them is let me just make sure that I have them. The first danger in pursuing holiness is that we think if we just live holy enough, if we just make enough right decisions, that God will love us more, and that will be good enough. If I can make sure that I protect myself from sexual sin, then I'll be okay with God. And that's a false it's a false assumption, and it's misguided, and it won't create lasting change.
Yeah, it's burnout faster.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, because you can't do that. It's funny because I thought about sharing this yesterday, and it didn't make it in. the things that we do to protect us and to help us make choices that allow us to be holy. I had a friend. I will say a friend. I had a friend. This is not me, but I really did have someone in my life that struggled. This is a long time before things were on TV that are on TV now, but just wrestled with TV getting in the way of his relationship with God. And, he'd turn it off, he'd make a list, he'd do things to limit the impact of media on his mind and his heart. And he finally cut the cord to his TV. He severed the wires so that the TV wouldn't be plugged in. The reason I remember is because then he talked about, I forget what the reason was, but then taking the end of the cord and patching it together so that he could watch again and watch something that he wanted to watch. Yeah. And just talked about that struggle. Yeah. That's such a visual image to me of that struggle between right and wrong that goes on for us if we try and just curb our desires to be holy. It's not going to work. So that's the first one. Or it's if we try and be holy so that God will accept us, that's not going to work. The second one I could have spent a lot more time talking about, because there really is theology that says when you're made holy by giving your life to Jesus, when that happens, that eliminates the sin nature that's in us, that you'll never sin again. Mm-hmm. And that if you're still sinning, it's because you've not given yourself fully to God. And it's just not true. It's not sustainable, but it's not true. Mm-hmm. And that then creates this sense of failure and defeatism and alienation from God, because it's like, I'm trying, right, but I keep falling. And so there's got to be something wrong with me. Maybe I'm really not saved or whatever. Mm-hmm. And it's just, we are never going to eliminate the sin nature in us, no matter how much we love Jesus, because we live with the curse of Adam. That human. Yeah, we struggle with sin. And the third thing is that we pursue holiness so that you think I'm holy. I know I'm not really holy, but I care. I want other people to think I'm holy, so I pursue holiness, and I create lots of rules. So I say, I can't go to that movie because people will think, he's not very righteous, mm-hmm. or I can't, I can't do X, Y, Z. I can't do this kind of behavior or go to this kind of place or whatever, and that's not holiness either. And that really, I said in both services, the core of the message is, how is it that you're holy? Well, you grow in your holiness by growing in your love for Jesus. That the more you love him, the more you give him your mind and your heart, the more you're drawn to him, and the more that you recognize that anything else is just, that in my notes, the word was drivel. I thought, if I say drivel in the sermon, people are going, drivel. But drivel is a word that means nonsense. It's just nonsense to think that those other things will be fulfilling and create happiness. They'll fill that hole that's in us. It's just not going to happen. Mm-hmm. And the more we fall in love with Jesus, the more that we're drawn to him, the less attractive those things become. And so the holiness that comes, that's the not yet holiness that Larry talked about a couple of weeks ago. We are made holy through Jesus' death on the cross, but we're not yet holy because that's a lifelong process. The more that we give Jesus our life, the closer to him we get, the holier, the more holy our life becomes.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you brought these up, because at first, I don't know if I was the only one who thought it, but it's kind of like, well, okay, we already know that a little bit. We got to be careful with those things or whatever. But I think it's important because you can see where your good intentions get tripped up like in this. Like when you were talking about the last one, like, so other people think I'm holy. I feel like, you know, we're supposed to, like, what we're told, I think sometimes is like, well, when you act like a Christian and you're doing good things, then that brings other people to Christ. And it's like, okay, so now everybody's watching me, and that's where that comes from. Of I'm only doing it because I want other people to see me. Where, and what you said is like, it's, well,
when in reality, the more holy we are, the more we're drawn to Jesus, the more attractive Jesus is, not the lifestyle.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. And I mean, you called the sermon, with I, an attorney, be like, the whole time, like, eyes on the prize. Eyes on Jesus. That's like, that's what our goal should be. But,
yep.
All right. So this was another long one. So can you talk to couples about being careful about one spouse wanting to exercise with another opposite sex person with another couple? It looks harmless, but should never happen no matter how innocent it looks. It's dangerous. Yeah. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yes. So there's a very specific question in there. Mm-hmm. And there's, I think, a bigger question in terms of recognizing choices that we make that put us in vulnerable places.
Yeah.
And so what do we do? How do we approach that? I think, Jesus said, be wise as serpents and as soft as doves, wise as serpents and innocent as doves is what that says. I think that we need to recognize that we can be pretty stupid sometimes and end up in situations where it's just really dangerous. That's true physically. There's a whole bunch of times in my life where I've thought, how did I end up here? This is not the best place to be. It's not the best situation. This is really, really dangerous.
Or have you ever heard when people say, like, if you have to ask, then it's probably not a good idea?
Yeah.
Kind of a deal, like, same thing. Like, if you have to be like, well, is this okay?
Yeah.
Why are you asking?
Yeah.
Probably not.
But even on practical terms, so I'm trying to think of one of the more recent ones. When I was skiing in Utah with some guys from Northpointe this February, there were a couple times that I ended up in a place on a ski slope that it was like, why am I here? This is not very smart, and it's going to be painful to get out of here. Mm-hmm. The same thing happens for us spiritually, that it's like sometimes we kind of wake up and say, how did I end up in this mess spiritually? And so we need to be wise and to recognize that the power of sexual attraction that God built into us, both as men and women, and that glue aspect that's there, God intentionally made that really, really powerful. Don't downplay that. And so you have to be protective of your marriage vows. You have to be protective of the danger that's there, whether you're married or not, in terms of just recognizing. I would even say the same thing is true. When couples, I talked about doing premarital yesterday. When couples are engaged, you've got to be extra careful to limit being in situations where assuming that you're waiting until marriage to consummate the marriage, that you don't end up in a situation where you just lose track of stuff because of the power of sexual attraction that God built into us. So you've got to do that at all kinds of stages in your life, in your relationship. And so we live in a culture, I don't know that I've thought through this, and so be gentle with me in terms of my wording right now, but we live in a culture that downplays our responsibility in terms of how it impacts others. So, the most common thing in the last several years is that it's not uncommon for women to say, I can wear whatever I want, and if guys think the wrong thing, that's their fault. Mm-hmm. Well, yes, it's their fault, but there is culpability, there's responsibility that comes with the actions that we take that impact others negatively.
Yeah, that's interesting because I think that is like a very hot topic. That's not. I mean, not. I don't even know. Not anymore as much. Like, because now people do just wear whatever they want, and it's not so much a conversation piece. You know, at least with like younger people, like that's not even. Like you said, we haven't thought this through. But
No,
like, it's just kind of like, it's one of those things where, you know, that's something, especially my generation and even younger, like watching my sisters and on social media and going through things. It's easy to get wrapped up in, oh, well, this is what everybody else is saying kind of a deal. So this is what I'm going to do.
And to just not think through how the choices that we make impact others. This is same thing, you know, from the opposite end. It's easy for a guy to say, I'm just being a guy. If she takes that the wrong way, that's her fault.
And I think we talked
it's just not.
Yeah. And I think we talked about it in another podcast. I'm pretty sure it was you and me where I just said, like, right now it's very like a self-centered like culture, maybe is the way to say it. Like, it's all about me and, well, I need free time. I need me time. Like, which, like, yeah, there's a time and place where if you need to be by yourself to regroup, because I'm that type of person, I need to like go recharge away from others kind of a deal. But I don't know, maybe it's just part of being adult is doing things that you don't always want to do and taking care of others. But then it's also realizing, like, when you get married, like, we are, like, Jacob and I are one person now. So it's like, his feelings are my feelings, and I care about the things he cares about, and then vice versa. So
it's that whole 100-100 thing that I talked about too. I think way back when a couple of years ago, podcast with Mark, we talked about. We think it's easy for us culturally to say, I have the right to do what I have the right to wear whatever I want. I have the right to go wherever I want. I have the right to drink as much as I want. I have the right to do whatever. When we choose to follow Jesus, we give up our rights. It's not, we don't have the right to do anything except to live for Jesus. Because if he is Lord, he's the one that determines every choice that we make, every action. And my rights are curbed. My rights are limited. My rights, I don't have rights. My life is impacted by how my actions impact others. So if I'm gonna put you in danger, I don't have the right to do that. If I'm going to jeopardize my marriage, I don't have the right to do that. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a penalty thing. That's honoring the people that we care about.
Right.
You know, it's living out our faith, being in love with Jesus, and having that having that impact the choices that we make, the action.
Yeah, sure. Like, just to talk to people, maybe who don't agree with the way you live or don't, think the same way as you, in regards of like how you live your life or marriage or all, like, everything that we've been talking about. Like, how do you? It was one of the questions. How do you talk to?
Do that?
Yeah, but just. I don't know, just because I'm thinking of like how I've talked with some of my friends and how it just doesn't go over well, kind of a deal, or it just doesn't click, doesn't register. They say, whatever, kind of deal. Or so with the younger kids, it's hard because it's getting shoved down your throat all the time.
You sound so old. With those younger kids, how old are you, Sylvia?
24.
I love it.
Old. My sisters would say I'm old. They make fun of me because they say 1999. They say that's your birthday. That's embarrassing. And I'm like, how's that? They're all 2000s babies. So just
that's
with
funny.
Younger kids, because you
were born in a different century.
Yeah, they make fun of me. They're relentless. Younger siblings. But yeah, so like, how do you talk to younger kids who, you said, see people dressing up however they want? How do I, tell my siblings like, oh, you don't have to do that, like, or because you can't force anybody to care about others.
Yeah.
But how do you even bring that up?
I think it's it really is about being in a relationship with somebody. You can't to just try to engage in the conversation unless somebody knows that you care deeply about them.
Right.
Is not going to be productive.
It won't go over well.
I think. Again, I just don't think that we critically think very often. So I think to be able to say, hey, when you're wearing that, why are you wearing that? And do you know what that communicates to other people? Do you know that it communicates that you are whatever? And to not do that in a slap them upside of the head kind of way. But to say, to say to one of your sisters, hey, when you wear that and you're talking to a guy, where's his attention?
Yeah. And see, it is hard for me too, because I kind of think in the way of like younger, like when you said that, like I kind of think that way too. Like why, I don't dress. I don't think I dress like crazy.
Provocatively.
I really don't think I do.
That's good.
But when they talk about more serious topics, more of like a guy, if somebody came up and touched me, inappropriately, but I was wearing this, like that makes sense to me. So like, I think it's also meeting people halfway, like saying, I understand this part,
Right.
You just have to understand that, what you said, you have a responsibility, like to help others. And I think right now, another thing that goes around with young kids and on social media, which, okay, I'm a young kid too, I see it on social media, but is like being kind to others. Like people say, oh, be kind. Like that's coming back now. It's just, why can't we be nice to others? And it's like, it's a good question, but also it's like, it's part of that responsibility. Like that is also thinking about others is being kind. And it just seems like a revolutionary idea now for, I don't know why.
I think because when kindness becomes a secondary or third kind of issue, you miss it. It becomes so attractive when somebody is kind, and I don't mean attractive in a sexual kind of way. You're drawn to it. Yeah, I think that I just think that we need to think and pray and ask the Holy Spirit to help show us, because like I've got ministry friends, or one ministry friend in particular who would say, I will never touch a girl like at all. Like they want to hug me, they're the hugging, I'm not responding. And that's probably very safe in our culture. I tend to think on the I try to tend to think from a big picture kind of perspective to say, you know what, there are kids that don't get hugs, that don't get any touches, and if I can give them a hug in a really wholesome kind of way that affirms them without any kind of weirdness to it, that's so valuable. But we live in things are so messed up that we have to think, and we have to trust the Holy Spirit.
Right. And so correct me, like, if this doesn't make sense, what I'm about to say, but it's a responsibility for like other people to just start thinking about others. But also I think as a Christian, it's our responsibility to like what you said is think before you say, pray about it, what you just said.
Right.
Like, because sometimes I think we don't go about it the best way either. So like, I think it's really every single person's responsibility in this situation, because, people need to be more receptive too. Yep. People need to be more receptive, and people need to come at it a little bit more gentle, I think, because sometimes these conversations can go wrong. A lot of times these conversations can go wrong because that's why people get upset and then flip so hard the other way and are so argumentative,
Even as I was just talking a second ago, I thought I'm on a recording and I'm saying, yeah, I hug kids. And
people can take anything in the wrong way, but that's what I'm saying. Like, if you are confused about something, like, just ask questions and come in it, be gentle. Like, even one of my best friends, like, we don't agree on everything politically, or even, even religion-wise. We do not agree, but it's just, we talk to each other so gently and respectfully that it works. Like, it's just, and then I always think, why can't I talk to everybody like this? And it's just, you have to have that. It's a mutual respect. And like you said, you have to have that relationship with people. So sometimes it's, I know certain people, I'm like, I'm not going to get into that.
And you have to cultivate that kind of relationship. Yeah. And sometimes that's hard because the person that you're talking to doesn't want to go there.
Yep.
They don't want to have that kind of conversation. And I think when when you recognize that that's the case, you can't persist and try and say, I want to have this conversation.
Right.
You just have to kind of back off
Yep.
and affirm things that you know to be true, to be able to say, you know what, I care about you too much. I don't want to fight about this.
Yeah.
I care about you too much.
And always be that person where they can come and
Right.
talk to you. Like
Yep.
you're kind of that. We
Yep.
kind of got off the topic of marriage, but just to bring it back. So the purpose for marriage.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is it?
Well, I talked about it. It really was kind of revolutionary for me to discover that Catholic dogma says there are three purposes of marriage: having kids, having a lifetime relationship with someone, and having a place where sex is honored. The intimate physical relationship is honored by God. What was so revolutionary for me in that was, if I said to you before you and Jake got married, what's the purpose of marriage?
I probably would have said, I don't know. I feel like I would have said, to have a best friend, like a partner in life kind of a deal. But also because we're just told that's what you do.
Oh, and that may be.
Yeah.
I do think most people, if you peel back the onion and ask the why question multiple times,
Yeah.
even if you talk about having a permanent best friend, most people would say, because I want a permanent best friend. I want to find fulfillment in this relationship. I want somebody to meet my needs.
Do you think that's the same for Christians and non-Christians?
I think it's true for everybody that doesn't think.
Oh.
I think I think culturally that's the mindset that we have, which is completely different in other cultures. Because if you have an arranged marriage, it's not so you can be happy.
Yeah.
That's, if your mom and dad and their mom and dad
So what
are
it
saying,
is.
what's the purpose of marriage? Well, it's to create a family and to
Yeah.
have kids and to be together for the rest. The whole happiness piece is not even on the radar. In our culture, part of why I want to use that in premarital is because to have people identify and say, I'm getting married because I want to be happy. To be able to say, you know what? Marriage will never make you happy. It just won't. And if you think that, as soon as you stop to be happy,
Yeah.
you're ready to bail.
Yeah.
If the purpose that you get married is so that you can be happy, when you're not happy anymore, what's keeping you there? Because it's hard.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say. I mean, marriage is a great thing, but it's like hard work.
It's hard.
And I think a lot of people do talk about that.
I love you, Deb.
I love you, Jacob. No, but I mean, everybody knows that. Like it takes work, and I think even when you talk about being having a best friend, any relationship takes work. It takes work for me to be in a good relationship with my mom or my mother-in-law or
Your boss.
my boss. Takes work. Takes work. Let me tell you, this guy. But yeah, I think when it's kind of like what we talked about earlier, like when you're not committing to somebody fully, then it's easy to just bail and have a way out.
Right.
So
I think the thing that you hear all the time when people get a divorce is I don't love them anymore. I'm not happy in the marriage. Yeah. So that's not its purpose.
and it's the same as what you said, like as having sex before, where it kind of like it is ripping two people apart kind of a deal. And so it's the same with marriage and divorce. That's why it's so hard. It's because you're literally ripping people apart and families. And I can see how it's hard. I have not had to go through that, thankfully enough, but you can just see other people how hurt and damaged
and
make relationships.
And it damages more than just the two people who are married to each other.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
So we also talked about make it your goal to live a quiet life, minding your own business and working with your hands. Did we already talk about that? We talked about it a little bit, maybe.
Oh yeah, the one thing that didn't really make it in the message is that, I talked about the Greek culture. They felt like manual labor was beneath them.
Oh. Yeah.
But
Sometimes people do now.
Oh yeah.
Make fun of people who do manual labor, even though it's like, How do you think you got your house though?
Yeah.
So-
You know, what's really interesting to me is, so we lived in Washington, D.C., where highest educational level in the country, highest income, all that kind of stuff. And people do all kinds of stuff and hire out anything manual that needs to be done. Moving to Michigan, there is a higher level of esteem for the trades in Michigan than any place that we've lived. More so than Missouri, more so than Ohio, more so than in Washington, D.C.
More so than Ohio. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and maybe it's been where we've lived. You know,
sure.
the more upper middle class kind of environment, the more it's like, they're just whatever, you know, just a plumber, just an electrician, whatever. And in Michigan, there really is culturally a value to somebody who's a carpenter, somebody who can fix things, somebody who works in the plant on cars, all that kind of thing. Here's what I wanted to say more about that in the message that didn't happen was in the first century, that was one aspect of it, but also commentators say that Paul was really targeting people that were political, that the guys who would stand around the city and wax eloquent about stuff that didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And he says, look, live a simple life, mind your own business, and do something with your hands. Do something productive. Don't just yap about stuff.
That's my biggest pet peeve. Is funny you say that. Is like the people who will always like bring up problems or either complain or whatever, even if they mean it well, but then they don't do anything. Or like you offer solutions and then nothing happens.
Right.
Biggest pet peeve. And I realized that in high school. Like we're, doing class meetings and I was like, oh my gosh. Like if you don't like this, what should we do then? Oh, nothing.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of just like, come on now, people.
Yeah. So I think the challenge that's there for us is to recognize, okay, there were some cultural things that were going on, whether it was people had bad view of people who did manual labor or people who were just taking advantage. Christians, commentators also say that within the church in Thessalonica, there were people who were so consumed with thinking Jesus is going to return, that they didn't do anything. Yep. And they were then looking to other people to support them financially while they're waiting for Jesus to come back. And Paul's saying, no, get to work.
Yeah, keep your life going.
Yeah. I think when you look at all of that and say, okay, how's that apply for us in 2023? I think there really is a challenge to say there's something really valuable with being able to do physical stuff to create things. I've said before when we were in Ohio, and ministry is one of those things that it's like, yeah, I'm not building anything. I'm building people's lives, hopefully helping them know Jesus. But part of what I loved about our place in Ohio was that we had 50 fruit trees. And there was something incredibly fulfilling for me about being able to go work in the fruit trees and prune and gather and fertilize, do all that stuff that was manual labor to create a harvest. And so I think that there is something that's really beneficial no matter kind of where we are in life, whether that's gardening, building, carpentry,
Yeah. I was going to say, I don't know if a lot of people know, I know I've talked about it on here before, but I have a farm. And it sounds like to me that Rick just said he wants to come do farm chores with me bright and early. Come on, Rick, you can bring your family. I'll teach you all how to take care of all the cows, chickens. That's what it sounded like to me anyway. I could have taken that
you guys are working with your hands, and that's
next staff outing.
Good stuff. That's what we should do. Yeah.
Yes, go into the barn. Janet is not coming.
No,
I don't even have to invite her. I know the answer is no.
Yeah, I am shamefully unaware. My grandpa had a farm, but we would go once or twice a year. Well, we would go hunt, and I'd see all the farm stuff, but I don't know anything about.
I won't lie,
life.
though. Honestly, my favorite is when people get to come and just kind of do it for fun.
Yeah.
I love when people bring their kids or whatever, because it's like, a day on the farm.
Yeah,
make a little outing.
one of our daughters, when she was in high school, really loved horses and was trying to get horse time, and part of how she got horse time was mucking stalls.
Oh yeah.
And that's hard, dirty work, but necessary to have horses.
Yep.
So
Just part of it. So.
Yeah.
Well, did you have anything else you want?
I'm done. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you for sticking with us and watching our episode of Northpointe Plus. We'll see you next week. Please like, subscribe, share, all of that good stuff. And we will see you again in a week.